Welcome. This is another in a series of videos with Aubrey Daniels from Aubrey Daniels International, based on the book, Oops, Management Practices That Waste Time and Money and What to Do About Them. In this video, we're going to talk about money, the inefficient ways that employees are paid, and the inefficient ways that companies plan for it. So we're about to cause a great deal of controversy by saying that higher pay doesn't necessarily lead to better results.
Doesn't. You know, if higher pay increased productivity, then General Motors would not be in the problem it's in.
This is true. So, given that, does that mean that you can get by with paying people not very much money?
No. The goal of an organization is to pay the people the most money you can pay them. The question is, how can you afford that? Now, what happens with pay these days is that salary, bonuses, and other things are not contingent on performance. In other words, a salary is
they're an entitlement.
Well, it's show up. You're being paid to show up. In other words, if you make your salary whether you work or whether you don't. I mean, you come to work and you could do your job or you couldn't, and so you do enough at least to stay on the payroll. So what is needed is a way to reward the people who add value to what the company's about.
And so how do I tell that? If I'm not making widgets,
yes.
You know, if you're manufacturing something that's an easy metric,
right?
You know that John made 35 widgets today and his goal was
Yes.
32, so hey, today was good. What if I'm not in that line of work?
Well, the issue of measurement is really looked at, I think, from the wrong perspective, and that is that if you hire somebody, you hire them to do a job. Now, if you don't know what you want them to do, then you're not going to be efficient anyway. So the idea is to develop a metric so that they know how they're doing as well as you know how you're doing. And even if it's to get them to rate themselves and you rate them on a daily basis and you compare your ratings and say, well, wait a minute, you said you were a 5, I thought you were a 4. So, well, why did we do that? So we can build a measurement system. There are ways to do that. You see, adjectives and adverbs are used in our language to differentiate one thing from another. We say something's pretty, something's not. Something's beautiful, something's ugly. We can put numbers to those, and we can begin to tie those to specific behaviors or accomplishments.
And that's how you do it if you're in a service business, which a lot of folks are.
Absolutely.
That tends to have some of the higher salaries.
Absolutely.
Other things that don't work, annual bonuses, why not?
Well, the problem with the bonus is that most people don't know why they got it or what they got it. What bothers me today is there are a lot of things on the web talking about pay for performance, and many of them talk about how it doesn't work. Well, it does work if it's designed like it should be, and that is you're paying for performance. If the company has a good year, and then they give people a bonus for that, typically what they do is they divide it some way according to your pay grade or your salary.
How long
and
you've been
everybody
there.
gets the same thing. In other words, if you and I are in the same pay grade or we make roughly the same amount of money, we get the same amount of bonus. Well, one of us may have worked very much harder than the other. One of us may have accomplished a lot more than the other. So if we set up a system where we can look at what are the accomplishments and pay people according to that, then in fact people end up making more money under this kind of plan than they typically do now.
I didn't see this in the book, but I'm curious about it. Do you find that companies that do this well include customer feedback about an employee or a division or a product in the whole metric?
Well, obviously if the employee interfaces with the customer, that should be a part of it, absolutely. You know, in terms of how well you do with that customer. You know, how well are you serving that customer? And there are ways to measure that as well.
Every year, depending on when your fiscal year is, it could be September you have to start dealing with this. It could be February, if July is when you start. It's budgeting time. Mm-hmm. And it's an exercise that people despise because it's, I don't know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of cause and effect to it.
Right.
Do you need to budget? Are you advocating that not happen?
You absolutely need to budget. But the idea is that budgeting should be an exciting time because we're talking about the growth and development of the organization. Or we may be talking, these days, talking about survival, but it should be something that we're excited about. My experience, nobody's excited about this. And typically what we do is, with budgeting, we end up sometimes rewarding and punishing the wrong behaviors. When I was at Georgia Regional Hospital, I was in charge of the education training program there and patient training programs. And I knew that we needed more staff than we could afford. So we got volunteers involved. Well, I ended up with a surplus in my budget because of that. What I discovered, and this was my first job, and I had about like $250,000, and this was 35 years ago, which was real money then. Well, what I discovered was that I was very proud of that, but they took that money away from me for the next year. They gave it to somebody who'd spent all their money. So that was the last time I ever had a surplus. You know, I figured this is not a good way to do things. It seems to me that the way we ought to budget is the people that are most responsible in how they spend their money should get more money next year, not less.
Reward the staff who's being efficient.
Absolutely.
Another thing you can do as a motivator is, rather than pay or in terms of those who are doing well with their budget, is to give something that's going to propel the company forward. That could be training, that could be software, that could be equipment.
Well, this is the whole idea of understanding what are the positive reinforcers for the managers and the people involved. And it doesn't always include money. In other words, if I do a great job with my budget, you know, I might be allowed to have a little time to do some research on a better way to do something. I might be able to change priorities in terms of some things we're going to do, and I could up a priority where I get to do something that I've wanted to do, but it hadn't been a priority for the organization. But because I did a good job in the use of the money that I'd been given or the resources I'd been given, then I get some favorable treatment.
You know, one of the overarching themes I get out of this book is that if you run your company this way as positive reinforcement, the degree to which you have to manage and the number of managers that you have to employ is much different than if you operate the company another way.
You know, I believe that if we used money well, that many of the systems that people don't like would disappear. We wouldn't need appraisals, we wouldn't need employee of the month, we wouldn't need any of these kind of things to motivate people. But because we use money poorly in the way people are given money or the way they earn it, then we need all these other systems to counteract the negative aspects of it.
Aubrey Daniels. Aubrey, thank you. This is another in a series of videos from Aubrey Daniels International based on the book, Oops, Management Practices That Waste Time and Money and What to Do Instead. Available now online at aubreydaniels.com.